In the 1780s, France was a nation starving. Bread prices were surging, the economy was in a tailspin, and hovering above it all was the Palace of Versailles. It operated as an isolated, high-security political compound, heavily guarded and entirely disconnected from the industrial-era misery of Paris. Inside this compound sat a highly toxic asset. It was a staggering 1.6 million livre diamond necklace, roughly $15 million today. King Louis XV originally commissioned it for his mistress, Madame du Barry. It took years of grueling labor just to collect and set the nearly 650 diamonds required to meet the royal demand. But before the jewelers could finish the piece, Louis XV died of smallpox. The new king banished du Barry from court, leaving the jewelers holding a massively expensive, unsellable piece of inventory. They repeatedly offered it to the new queen, Marie Antoinette, but she turned it down, stating the nation needed naval ships more than jewelry. The jewelers were facing bankruptcy. They had a $15 million necklace that nobody could afford, and the one person who could refused to touch it. This massive, unwanted financial liability floating around the edges of the royal court created a massive structural vulnerability. Enter Jeanne de la Motte. She was an impoverished noblewoman with a dubious royal bloodline, operating in the shadows of the French court. She was looking for a way to extract wealth from this elite structure, and she knew the jewelers were desperate to offload their masterpiece. To get the necklace, she needed a mark. She found one in Cardinal Rohan. Rohan was a wildly wealthy, highly gullible former ambassador. He had gossiped his way out of Marie Antoinette's inner circle and was now desperate to do whatever it took to regain the queen's favor. Jeanne realized the vault wasn't made of stone and iron, it was made of perceptions. She began crafting a network of false information to re-engineer the way Rohan saw the world around him. In the court of Versailles, access was the only currency that mattered. By appearing to hold the queen's trust, Jeanne could navigate any gate and bypass any guard. Jeanne convinced the isolated cardinal she was the queen's secret confidant. As the sole middleman, she controlled the information flow between the disconnected parties. Hiring a master forger, she created a clandestine back channel, sending Rohan letters supposedly written and signed by the queen herself. The correspondence escalated quickly. The letters started cordial, then grew increasingly flirtatious. Before long, Rohan was entirely convinced that Marie Antoinette was falling deeply in love with him. To cement the illusion, Jeanne orchestrated a physical infiltration. She hired a Parisian sex worker named Nicole d'Oliva, who strongly resembled the queen, arranging a late-night rendezvous in the dark, claustrophobic gardens of Versailles. Under the pale moonlight, Rohan met the imposter. The fake queen handed him a single rose and whispered that his past transgressions were forgiven, providing Rohan with the physical confirmation he needed. The illusion worked. Rohan was no longer acting as a prince of the church or a servant of the king. He had been rewired into a delivery mechanism for a heist. With Rohan hooked, Jeanne triggered the final stage of the con. She delivered a new forged letter instructing the cardinal to secretly purchase the diamond necklace on the queen's behalf, promising she would pay him back in installments. Eager to serve his royal lover, Rohan negotiated the purchase and secured the massive jewel from the desperate jewelers, and blindly handed it over to a man he believed was the queen's valet in a dark apartment. The valet was, of course, Jeanne's accomplice. The asset was immediately destroyed. The elaborate piece was brutally pried apart, the gold melted down, and the individual diamonds smuggled across the channel to be fenced on the London black market. Jeanne and her crew had successfully bypassed the security of the most powerful monarchy in the world, walking away with a fortune without a single alarm being raised. The entire operation came crashing down when the first payment deadline arrived. The jewelers, having not received their money, went directly to the real Marie Antoinette to complain. The queen had absolutely no idea what they were talking about, and the deception was instantly exposed. Furious, the queen demanded an immediate investigation. On the Feast of the Assumption, in front of a stupefied crowd of courtiers, Cardinal Rohan was subjected to a sudden, humiliating public arrest right in the middle of the crowded Hall of Mirrors. The crown scrambled to contain the truth. Rohan, Jean, and the rest of the conspirators were quickly swept up, subjected to intense interrogations, and locked away inside the grim, imposing walls of the Bastille fortress. At this point, the king could have handled the swindlers quietly. Instead, he made the disastrous decision to defend the queen's honor through a very public trial. He took a contained, private theft and turned it into an uncontrollable public spectacle. The trial was a sensation. In a shocking verdict, the cardinal was acquitted, largely viewed as an innocent dupe. Jean was found guilty, sentenced to be publicly whipped and branded with a V for voleuse, the French word for thief, before eventually escaping prison disguised as a boy. For Marie Antoinette, it was a catastrophic public relations failure. Despite her total innocence and lack of involvement, the French public firmly believed she had orchestrated the entire plot just to ruin the cardinal and get her hands on the expensive jewelry. The printing presses went to work. Unauthorized, highly scandalous pamphlets flooded the streets of Paris, mocking the queen's alleged involvement and systematically dismantling her reputation piece by piece. The structural damage to the monarchy was irreversible. To the starving population, the affair confirmed their absolute worst suspicions about the rotting corruption, moral decay, and wild extravagance of the elite class. The crown permanently lost the public trust. The anger over the massive debt, the starving citizens, and the perceived royal theft boiled over, leading an angry, armed mob directly to the palace gates. The heist stripped away the last of the monarchy's divine protection. When the Bastille was stormed just 4 years later, the public didn't see themselves attacking a sacred institution. They were tearing down a house of cards they already believed was hollow and corrupt. In the cold winter of 1822, heavy industrial printing presses across Scotland violently stamped out thousands of crisp new banknotes. Meanwhile, in the freezing harbor at Leith, 2 ships, the Honduras Packet and the Kennersley Castle, were loaded with hundreds of eager Scottish settlers. These passengers had traded their entire life savings for passage to a Central American paradise called Poyais. They were sailing directly into a meticulously engineered trap. The architect of this expedition was Gregor MacGregor. He called himself the Cazique, a self-appointed title meaning Prince of Poyais. He was a Scottish soldier who had recently fought in the Venezuelan War of Independence, where he had a documented habit of fleeing the battlefield and leaving his own men behind to die. Safe in London, he turned his attention to his own countrymen. He weaponized their hope and their geographical ignorance to execute a lethal financial crime. After the Napoleonic Wars ended, the British economy was flush with cash, but safe British government bonds were yielding a paltry 3% return. This line chart shows the stagnant flat line of a 3% British bond, contrasted with the sharp spike of a 6% yield. Investors were desperate for that higher return, finding it in the high-risk foreign debt of newly independent Latin American nations. MacGregor knew exactly who to target. In the 1690s, Scotland had bankrupted itself trying to build a colony in Panama called Darien. MacGregor pitched Poyais to Scottish retirees and workers as a chance to finally redeem that generational trauma. He engineered a financial product that perfectly filled the economic demands of the London Stock Exchange and the emotional vulnerabilities of the Scottish working class. To sell the illusion, MacGregor commissioned a 355-page guidebook written by an invented author named Captain Thomas Strangways. It described a flourishing capital city named St. Joseph, complete with a deep-water port, a thriving opera house, and a domed cathedral. None of it existed. Investor capital poured into a £200,000 London bond, supposedly secured by Poyais tax revenues, represented here by an empty, dashed box. The chart expands, showing secondary income streams, legation offices selling retail land certificates directly to the public. The sheer bureaucratic scale of the operation, the printed currency, the leather-bound books, the government offices, convinced the financial elite that the country was real. When the settlers finally reached the Mosquito Coast coordinates in late 1822, they looked for the deep water port and the opera house. They found nothing. Instead of a European-style capital, they stepped into an untouched, insect-infested jungle completely devoid of civilization. The expedition collapsed rapidly. The rain season began, bringing inescapable swarms of mosquitoes. Malaria and yellow fever tore through the stranded colonists. Of the roughly 250 men, women, and children who locked themselves into this one-way voyage, at least 180 died in the mud or shortly after being evacuated. McGregor's financial masterpiece had become a mass casualty event. On the Mosquito Coast, abstract securities fraud had a body count. As the emaciated survivors returned to London and the press published their accounts, McGregor quietly packed his bags and fled to Paris. There, he approached a French trading company and attempted to execute the exact same Poyais colonization and bond scheme all over again. Suspicious French authorities arrested him. Yet during his trial for fraud, he charismatically deflected the blame onto his subordinates and secured a stunning acquittal. He returned to London and shamelessly launched lesser versions of the Poyais scam. When angry original investors demanded their interest payments, he paid them off with newly printed, utterly worthless land certificates. The dizzying complexity of international law, combined with his victims' desperate sunk cost fallacy, their psychological refusal to abandon an investment they had already poured their life savings into, provided an impenetrable shield. In 1838, McGregor made his final escape. He relocated to Venezuela, the very country whose army he had abandoned decades earlier. In a final, infuriating twist, he was welcomed back as a hero. The Venezuelan government granted him a general's pension, and when he died in 1845, he was buried with full military honors. McGregor proved that a lethal trap could be constructed entirely from paper, ink, and the limitless bounds of human desperation. In 1920s Boston, Charles Ponzi emerged as a master of financial optimism. With a sharp suit and a disarming smile, he moved through a city hungry for prosperity, promising everyday citizens a clear path to extraordinary wealth. His pitch was simple and incredibly alluring. Hand over your cash, and in exactly 45 days, you would receive your investment back with a guaranteed fixed 50% profit attached. He claimed this wealth came from arbitrage, exploiting the price difference between two markets. The asset was the International Reply Coupon, or IRC, a voucher for international mail. By purchasing IRCs at a discount in war-torn Europe and bringing them to the United States, Ponzi claimed he could trade them for higher value postage and sell them for cash. The mechanics sounded highly logical to a public familiar with government postage and shifting exchange rates. Because the story made superficial sense, people lined up by the thousands, ignoring the physical impossibility of scaling such a loophole to match his massive promises. On the surface, the Securities Exchange Company hummed with the energy of a legitimate bank. The office was packed with clerks and typists, all frantically logging new deposits for a rapidly expanding financial empire. But underneath that bustling floor plan, there was absolutely no investment engine. The operation generated zero actual revenue. No ships were crossing the Atlantic with coupons, and no massive trades were happening in the background. When a 45-day note came due, Ponzi simply took the cash deposited by the morning's newest investors and handed it directly to the people who had arrived weeks earlier. He had constructed a massive financial furnace. To keep the structure from growing cold, he was forced to constantly shovel larger and larger piles of new deposits to sustain the illusion. We can see exactly how this machine operates by mapping the routing of investor cash. Incoming money, seen in the green investor payments block, routes directly into the central, unregulated red Ponzi entity financial account. Instead of funding a real business activity, these funds are immediately siphoned downward. They flow back out to the initial and secondary investors, creating the fake returns that convinced more people to join. Whatever surplus remains is diverted upward. The operator funnels investor cash into secondary bank accounts, quickly siphoning it away to purchase mansions, cars, and luxury goods. This specific architecture is what transforms a business into a predatory trap. Without any external revenue generation, the entire system is fueled exclusively by the very people it is designed to bankrupt. By the summer of 1920, Ponzi had taken in roughly $15 million. Generating 50% returns on that massive sum required moving postal coupons on an industrial scale that didn't actually exist. This chart compares Ponzi's required inventory against reality. The massive shape on the left represents the 160 million coupons he needed to cover his debts. The microscopic dot on the right shows the total number of coupons that existed globally, just 27,000. The math made the collapse inevitable. Skeptical postal inspectors realized the global coupon supply was untouched, and financial journalists began applying intense investigative pressure to the company's impossible numbers. A closed financial system built on exponential liability expansion must mathematically implode. Once the supply of new investors runs dry, the machine runs out of fuel and the structure collapses. In July 1920, the Boston Post shattered the illusion. They revealed that the city's financial wizard had previously served time in a Canadian prison for forgery and was later incarcerated in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary for smuggling aliens into the country. Panic replaced optimism instantly. Thousands of investors swarmed the streets outside Ponzi's headquarters, forming a massive, chaotic bank run as they fought to withdraw their funds before the building was emptied. The vaults were essentially empty. 6 local banks failed in the aftermath, leaving the vast majority of investors with just pennies on the dollar for their life savings. The devastation went beyond the $15 million lost. The true tragedy lay in the realization that the public had spent months willingly shoveling their own life savings into the furnace. Fast forward to today, and the underlying architecture of Charles Ponzi's machine remains entirely unchanged. The multi-billion-dollar implosion of Bernie Madoff's firm used the exact same subterranean mechanics that defrauded Boston in the 1920s. Modern scammers simply swap out postal coupons for new buzzwords like algorithmic trading or crypto arbitrage. The jargon is different, but they are still generating fake yields from new deposits rather than actual profit. The only defense against becoming fuel for a financial machine is to aggressively audit the math. Demand transparent proof of the architecture and walk away the moment you are promised everything for nothing. In September of 1935, the federal detention headquarters in Manhattan was marketed as an inescapable fortress. But on the Sunday before Labor Day, a prisoner housed on the 3rd floor cut through his window's wire netting and lowered a makeshift rope of tied bed sheets to the street below. The prisoner shimmied 50 feet down the brickwork in broad daylight. When a group of onlookers pointed at the man dangling from the wall, he calmly pulled a rag from his pocket and began wiping the glass. He pretended to be a window washer, gave a polite bow to the crowd, and sprinted away into the city. The fugitive was a phantom with 47 aliases. The Secret Service knew him as the Count, a man with a distinct scar on his left cheek who spoke 5 languages fluently. To the federal government, his true identity was so obscured by fake passports and aliases that his birth name remained a matter of speculation. He was the target of a massive federal manhunt because of the Lustig Watts super notes. This counterfeiting operation produced $100 bills so flawless, they fooled bank tellers across the country. By issuing money in direct rivalry with the U.S. Treasury, he had effectively threatened the stability of the American economy. The escape triggered a wave of public humiliation for federal authorities. As the government scrambled to reclaim the narrative, newspapers across the country led with headlines detailing how the nation's most dangerous conman had used simple bed sheets to bypass their high-security facility. This breakout mirrored the mechanics of his entire career. Lustig was a product of the industrial age, who treated physical and financial barriers as mere suggestions. He moved through iron bars as easily as he manipulated the national banking system. In 1925, the Eiffel Tower was not the romantic icon it is today. It was a decaying 7,000-ton liability. Built of puddle iron, a purified cast iron prone to corrosion, it required 60 tons of fresh paint every 7 years just to stay standing. To many Parisians, the structure was a rusting eyesore that had already outlived its 20-year lifespan. Lustig arrived in Paris and booked a room at the prestigious Hôtel de Crillon. He paid off the staff to use a dim basement storage room, which he outfitted with antique furniture to mimic an official government office suitable for clandestine state business. Using forged government stationery, Lustig invited the city's leading scrap dealers to a secret meeting. He introduced himself as the deputy director of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs and made a startling claim. The government had decided the tower was too expensive to maintain and was selling it for scrap. One dealer, André Poisson, was a newcomer anxious to secure a major contract. Lustig played on this ambition, but before closing the deal, he added a final hurdle. He demanded a $70,000 cash bribe to ensure Poisson's bid would be the one selected by the ministry. This chart shows the bribe trust loop Lustig used to bypass Poisson's defenses. To Poisson, a perfectly honest official would have seemed suspicious given the scale of the contract. But a corrupt official demanding a secret bribe felt authentic. The demand for illicit cash actually served as the proof Poisson needed to believe the entire scam was a genuine government deal. Lustig sold a scenario where the buyer's own desire for status drove the transaction. By the time the bribe was paid, Poisson had used his own ambition to convince himself that the lie was real. When Lustig returned to America in the 1930s, he scaled his operations to target the most dangerous men in the country. He even approached Al Capone with a business proposition, securing a $50,000 investment just to return it 2 months later, an act of feigned honesty that earned him Capone's test and a $5,000 reward. His most frequent parlor trick was the Romanian money box. It was a cedar chest equipped with brass dials and complex rollers. Lustig claimed the device used radium to chemically duplicate any banknote fed into its slot. The machine was engineered with a specific mechanical delay. Lustig would demonstrate the box by printing a genuine bill hidden inside, but he told victims the chemical process took 6 hours to complete. This window gave him the time he needed to flee the city before the buyer realized the machine only produced blank paper. Eventually, Lustig moved past selling fake machines and began manufacturing real currency. He partnered with a chemist to produce supernotes that were virtually indistinguishable from genuine US dollars, moving from psychological tricks to a massive industrial operation. This shift required a physical footprint that his earlier cons lacked. He was now managing heavy printing presses, engraved metal plates, and specialized chemical inks, tools that couldn't be packed into a suitcase or explained away with a smooth tongue. Industrial counterfeiting gave the Secret Service a physical trail to follow. By trading the untraceable art of psychological manipulation for the physics of mass production, Lustig provided authorities with the evidence they needed to hunt him down. In September 1935, the hunt ended in Pittsburgh. After a relentless cat-and-mouse game across several states, federal agents engaged Lustig in a high-speed chase through the city's industrial sector, finally ramming their vehicle into his car to force a surrender. Emerging from the wrecked vehicle, Lustig didn't reach for a weapon or a fake ID. He looked at the agents and simply said, "Well, boys, here I am." The conviction stripped him of his 47 aliases and his custom-tailored suits. He was sentenced to 20 years and sent to a facility designed with no room for charm or ambiguity. At Alcatraz, the architecture was the antagonist. This cutaway shows the cell block where Lustig was housed, a world of brutalist concrete and iron logic. There were no marks to read and no storage rooms to transform into fake offices. Isolated by the freezing, high-velocity currents of the San Francisco Bay, Lustig's skill set became a liability. A man who lived by reading and manipulating others found himself in an environment completely devoid of an audience. The prison environment eventually broke his health. After years of medical complaints that guards dismissed as another con, he was transferred to a medical center in Missouri, where he died of pneumonia in 1947. The man who sold the Eiffel Tower twice ended his life as prisoner number 300. On his death certificate, the clerk typed a final, mocking summary of a career built on million-dollar illusions: apprentice salesman.